Welcome to this Perspective webcast on the Z-score as a tool for financial risk management. My name is Koen Jansen. I'm a program manager at Perspective, a world-leading company in purchasing and supply chain trainings. The financial health of suppliers has always been of key importance to purchasing, but the economic downturn has increased the focus on tools and methods that support purchasers in identifying risks at their suppliers. The Z-score, or bankruptcy indicator, is one of the tools we can use to do this. With me is Mr. Jan Valkov, professional trainer and expert on purchasing costs and finance. Jan, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Koen, for inviting me, and thank you for having me.
Jan, could you briefly explain what the Z-score is?
The Z-score is a predictive model created by Professor Edward Altman in the 1960s. This model combines 5 different financial ratios to determine the likelihood of bankruptcy amongst companies. Generally speaking, the lower the score, the higher the odds of bankruptcy. Companies with Z-scores above 3 are considered to be healthy and therefore unlikely to enter bankruptcy. Scores in between 1.8 and 3 lie in a grey area, what we call the area of concern.
That sounds interesting and sounds complex. Shouldn't this be the task of my corporate controller?
Well, although it can be done by the controller, we consider it to be a main responsibility of procurement. Let's not forget that the outcome of the financial analysis is used as input for the portfolio manager or Kraljic matrix. It's also used to identify risks in case our company wants to enter into a long-term relationship with a supplier.
So I understand the Z-score is built up out of 5 ratios. Can't we just calculate 2 or 3 other ratios, like the current ratio, quick ratio or debt ratio?
This method is using 8 weighted variables from a company's income statement and balance sheet, plus the company's market value to calculate 5 specific ratios. To detect any signs of looming bankruptcy, investors calculate and analyze all kinds of financial ratios, like working capital, profitability, debt levels, and liquidity. The trouble is, each ratio is unique and tells a different story about a firm's financial health. At times, they can even appear to contradict each other. Having to rely on a bunch of individual ratios, the investor may find it confusing and difficult to know when a stock is going to the wall.
I can understand.
In a bid to resolve this conundrum, New York University professor Edward Altman introduced the Z-score formula in the late 1960s.
Okay.
Rather than search for a single best ratio, Altman built a model that distills 5 key performance ratios into a single score. As it turns out, the Z-score gives investors a pretty good snapshot of corporate financial health.
Okay, but knowing all this, what does it mean for me as a purchaser?
Strictly speaking, the lower the score, the higher are the odds of bankruptcy. A Z-score of lower than 1.8 indicates that the company is heading for bankruptcy. Companies with scores above 3 are unlikely to enter into bankruptcy, where scores in between 1.8 and 3 lie in a grey area. Because you will never be 100% sure that a company will go in default. You are approximately right and not absolutely wrong, but the general result indicates that the Altman score model proved to have an accuracy close to 80%.
Okay, but these percentages you mentioned, how reliable are these?
Well, let me tell you what independent research institutes say about this. For companies in the grey area, Altman's model proved to have an accuracy of 82% in predicting bankruptcy correctly 1 year prior to the default, and 76% of accuracy for the 2 years prior to bankruptcy. If companies go below a score of 1.8, the likelihood of going bankrupt within 1 year increases to a shocking 95% of all cases.
So when the score is beyond 1.8, should I quit all business with this supplier?
Difficult to say yes or no to this one. It depends on what kind of goods, materials or works you are buying from this supplier. If there is enough alternative suppliers available, I would not care too much. If they go bankrupt, you just switch to another supplier. But for the suppliers you can't afford to lose in your supply chain, you have to work out a plan to help them through the financially difficult period.
For which suppliers or categories should I use a Z-score? Should I use it for all my suppliers?
Well, at least for suppliers in the bottleneck and strategic quadrant of the Kraljic matrix. And it's also strongly recommended for suppliers with whom you want to enter into a long or longer term relationship. But again, like with any other ratio, you have to compare the results over time and within the specific industry to benchmark the outcome of your calculation. The top 5 sectors by Z-score ranking are household and personal products, semiconductors, healthcare, commercial services, and technology hardware.
Okay.
These sectors in general have ratings of far over 3.5, meaning healthy.
Good to know.
Other industries where relatively low scores are witnessed are telecoms, services and utilities, transportation, capital goods, and anything to do with cars. As Ford and GM shareholders no doubt already know.
Okay, so we discussed the added value for purchasing of the Z-score. Should I also tell my colleagues of all the departments about this?
Oh, definitely. Especially if your company is buying CAPEX, which most likely results in a long-term agreement with your supplier. The purchaser has to safeguard the delivery of spare parts and maintenance services to his or her company. If the Z-score is in the grey area, I suggest your company to pay attention to the purchasing and or sales terms and conditions, especially the question what to do when the supplier goes bankrupt, and also focusing on matters like how do we keep access to intellectual property rights and spare parts, and how to deal with warranty issues could give you a headache.
Okay, Jan, final one. If it's so important for purchasing, shouldn't we call it the purchasing score or P-score?
What's in a name? More important is to use the tool and prevent your company to run into a disruption of its supply chain because your supplier went bankrupt. Don't forget that managing the supply risk is one of the most important tasks for a purchaser.
So, that suppliers go bankrupt is unavoidable. But one of the tools used by procurement professionals today is the Z-score to detect looming bankruptcy. No guarantee given, but at least a timely warning signal. Thank you for joining us.